4 million years ago, something remarkable stirred in the heart of Africa. In the dust and heat of a world still half wild, a shadow moved differently. It walked not on 4 limbs, but on 2. This being was neither fully ape nor fully human, but something caught between, a creature balanced on the razor's edge of evolution. Its steps were careful, unsteady perhaps, but each one carried enormous weight. With every stride, the story of our kind was beginning to unfold. What exactly are we looking at here? An animal clinging to survival, or the earliest ancestor of every human alive today? The answer hides in its bones, its footprints, and in the faint echo of those first footsteps.
Imagine a face that looks oddly familiar. Flat nose, forward eyes, lips that could almost form an expression we'd recognize. Yet look again, and the illusion fades. The brow juts forward, the brain case is small, the jaw heavy and ape-like. It is a portrait suspended between worlds, a mirror that half reflects us, half denies us. How close were they to becoming us? The answer lies not in resemblance, but in adaptation. This face, strange as it seems, belongs to a survivor who walked upright long before our species was even imagined. Half human, half not, the perfect symbol of transition. Before cities, before even tribes, there was Africa, a land raw, untamed, and shifting beneath the weight of time. 4 million years ago, its climate was restless. Forests thinned into patches, savannas stretched wide, and rivers carved lifelines through harsh ground. In this uncertain world, survival demanded change. It was here that standing upright became more than an experiment. It became a strategy. What kind of world could shape such a body? A world that forced boldness, that tested every step, that rewarded those who could adapt. Africa was not just the stage. It was the relentless sculptor of the beings who would walk upon it. In a layer of hardened volcanic ash, preserved by rain and time, a trail of footprints stretches forward. At first glance, they look deceptively modern. A deep heel strike, a curved arch, toes aligned in a straight line. But these were not our feet. They belonged to beings who lived millions of years before us. Whose prints are these? And why do they feel so familiar? They are proof that walking on 2 legs was no accident, but a deliberate step into a new future. Each print is more than a mark in the ground. It is a prophecy etched in stone. Walking upright brought more than mobility. It rewrote the rules of survival. Freed from supporting weight, the hands could now carry food, hold young, or grasp stones. The eyes lifted higher, echoing louder than the bones themselves. Life on the savanna was never gentle. Big cats prowled the tall grass, crocodiles haunted the rivers, and hyenas laughed in the darkness. For a small, lightly built hominin, every day was a gamble. So what survival trick kept them alive? Not claws, not fangs, not brute strength. Instead, they relied on awareness, agility, and the safety of community. They scanned, they listened, they climbed, and above all, they stayed together. Against tooth and claw, their real defense was vigilance. And in that constant tension between hunter and hunted, the seeds of human cooperation quietly took root. So what are we truly seeing in those first steps? An ape balancing awkwardly on 2 legs, or the first ancestor learning to master a new world? If an ape could become an ancestor, what path did it walk? And where, across the endless landscapes of Africa, will those footprints lead us next? This is where our journey begins, with a being neither fully one thing nor the other, but something new, something possible. Every step forward from here will bring us closer to ourselves. The mystery has only just begun, and the echoes of those footsteps are calling us on. Africa, the cradle of humanity. 4 million years ago, Africa was already restless. The air shimmered with heat, dust swirled across plains, and storms gathered on the horizon. This was no paradise, it was a testing ground. Every creature that walked here faced choices that meant life or death.
Among them was a new kind of being, something almost human but not quite. Africa was the stage, and evolution was the playwright, shaping bodies and behaviors in ways no one could yet imagine. In this land of thunder and silence, something extraordinary was about to take its first fragile steps toward us. A great scar split the land, the East African Rift. Cliffs rose, valleys sank, and lakes formed like mirrors scattered across the earth. To cross this landscape meant navigating corridors of opportunity and traps of danger. Rivers carved paths that animals followed, creating natural crossroads where predators waited and prey risked everything. The rift was more than geology. It was a crucible, forcing adaptation with every shifting fault. To live here was to be shaped by time itself. And in these shifting valleys, the story of humankind would first take root, written in stone, soil, and bone. The land was a patchwork quilt. Dense forests clung to wetter ground, while open savannas stretched wide in the sun. Between them lay the borderlands, places of both risk and reward. In the cool shade of trees, safety and fruit could be found. Out in the grass, visibility was greater, but so was exposure. Every movement demanded a choice: stay hidden or step into the open. This mosaic of habitats forced new ways of living. It tugged at bodies and minds, slowly shaping creatures that could survive in both worlds, part climber, part walker, part something new. A quiet revolution spread across the plains. Hardy new grasses, called C4 grasses, blanketed the land. They were tough, fibrous, and poor in nutrients, but they fed vast herds of great grass into walls of flame that raced across the land. To those who fled, fire was terror. Yet, in its wake, new green shoots appeared. Fresh grazing drew animals, and hunters found opportunity. Danger and renewal came together in these fiery waves. The cycle of destruction and rebirth created landscapes rich in chance, if you were bold enough to take it. Fire was a sculptor too, shaping not only the land, but the choices of the creatures who lived on it. To fear it was natural, to use it, revolutionary. At dawn and dusk, the savanna belonged to hunters. Saber-toothed cats crouched in the grass, hyenas prowled the edges, crocodiles waited by water. For primates without fangs or claws, survival meant constant alertness. Every rustle might be wind or death. Eyes scanned, ears strained, bodies froze at the slightest sound. In this half-light, the line between life and loss was razor-thin. The world pressed vigilance into their instincts, carving sharp minds from fragile bodies. To walk upright in this theater of predators was not just bold, it was dangerous. But boldness in time would change everything. The richest places were also the riskiest. Riverbanks where water pooled, fringes where forest met grass, rocky outcrops that offered both shelter and exposure. Here food was plentiful, but danger stalked close. To thrive meant walking that edge every day, balancing hunger against fear. Those who dared reaped rewards, roots to dig, fruits to pluck, carcasses to scavenge. Those who hesitated starved. Life at the margins sharpened skills and habits, teaching flexibility that would become one of humanity's greatest tools. The edge was not just geography, it was the training ground of adaptation. Africa's heartbeat pulsed in cycles, wet and dry, feast and famine. Each season reset the rules. When rains came, food was abundant. When they failed, desperation ruled. Bands migrated, gambled on new routes, or clung to familiar ones. Sharing grew from necessity, and bold experiments in foraging meant the difference between the discovery that changed everything. It began with a small skull packed in a crate. Dug from a limestone quarry in South Africa in 1924, it was delivered to a professor's desk. At first glance, it looked like the face of a child, delicate, rounded, almost human. Yet its features were ancient. No one expected such a fossil in Africa, let alone one that seemed to bridge ape and human. Quietly, without fanfare, This little skull raised questions that would shake the foundations of science. Was this a missing link? Or just another oddity destined to be forgotten in the drawers of history? The fossil became known as the Tong child. At first it seemed small, unassuming, but hidden in its bones were clues. The opening where the spine entered the skull, the foramen magnum, sat forward, suggesting upright posture. The teeth were smaller than those of apes, more like ours. Here was a creature with an ape-sized brain but hints of walking on two legs. Could it be possible that walking upright came before brain expansion? The Tong child seemed to whisper yes, and in doing so, it rewrote the order of human evolution, long before anyone was ready to listen. Yet the scientific world was not ready to accept it. In the 1920s, the belief was firm. Europe or Asia, not Africa, must be humanity's cradle. The little skull from Tong challenged authority, and many dismissed it outright. A child with a tiny brain could not possibly stand at the dawn of humanity, they argued. For decades, the fossil sat in the shadows of skepticism, doubted and resisted. But truth, like bone, endures. The Tong child waited patiently for allies, its silent face reminding us that even the smallest discovery can defy the mightiest assumptions. Decades later, new explorers entered the deserts and valleys of East Africa. Armed with hunches, determination, and sharp eyes, they searched in the Afar Triangle of Ethiopia. It was a hostile land of dust and heat, where fossils seemed beneath her center of gravity. Her legs bore the marks of a steady stride. Though her long arms suggested she still climbed trees, her lower body belonged to a walker. The message was undeniable. Walking upright was not a late invention, but an early foundation. This challenged everything. Could it be that brains were not the spark that began our story, but legs? The evidence pointed one way. Evolution had put movement first, thought later. While Lucy's bones told one story, the ground itself told another. In northern Tanzania, a layer of volcanic ash hardened like cement millions of years ago. Then came a light drizzle of rain, softening the surface just enough. Across that ancient canvas, a group walked, their footprints pressed deep, capturing a moment in time. When the ash dried, it preserved their steps for eternity. Today, we call them the Laetoli footprints, and they are among the most haunting relics of our past, for they do not just show us bones, they show us behavior frozen in the act. The Laetoli footprints are unmistakably bipedal. Deep heels strike the ground, arches curve gently, and the big toes align straight, not splayed like an ape's. They reveal a confident, human-like stride. And yet, these prints were left by beings who lived more than 3.5 million years ago, long before Homo sapiens, long before even the genus Homo. To stand before those footprints is to feel an eerie connection across time. It is as though a family of distant ancestors has just walked past us, leaving a trail that leads, step by step, into our own lives. With each new discovery, the debate grew louder. Were these fossils and footprints really the ancestors of modern humans? Or were they evolutionary experiments, side branches that vanished? The scientific community wrestled with the evidence, forced to abandon old certainties. Africa, once dismissed, now looked undeniably like the heart of human origins. The bones refused to fit easy categories. They demanded humility, curiosity, and the willingness to accept that and the daily trials of survival. Wear-on teeth told stories of diets, tough plants, hard seeds, perhaps even scraps of meat. These details transformed fossils from lifeless relics into living portraits. For the first time, we could glimpse not just what our ancestors looked like, but how they lived, how they struggled, and how they adapted in a world where survival was never guaranteed. One skull, one skeleton, one trail of footprints. Alone, each might have been dismissed. Together, they formed a revelation. The Tong child hinted at upright posture. Lucy proved it in her bones. The Laetoli footprints confirmed it in action. Bipedalism had arrived long before big brains or stone tools. This was the turning point, the moment we understood that walking on two legs was the foundation of everything that followed. From Africa's dust and ash, the first clear picture of human origins emerged, and with it came the realization our story had begun far earlier than we ever imagined. What kind of creature was Australopithecus? Australopithecus was a creature caught between two worlds. Its body still carried the hallmarks of an ape: long arms, curved fingers, shoulders built for climbing. Yet its lower frame told another story: hips, knees, and feet shaped for walking upright across open ground. It was a living bridge, equally at home clinging to branches for safety as it was striding across savannas in search of food. This dual design was no accident. It was the product of a landscape in flux, a world where forests receded, grasslands spread, and only those who could master both realms would endure. Look closely at the skull of Australopithecus, and one fact stands out. The brain was still small, roughly a third the size of ours. It placed them closer to chimpanzees than modern humans. But small did not mean simple. These beings survived shifting climates, cunning predators, and uncertain food sources. Planning, awareness, and cooperation were possible even with modest brains. The question lingers: how far can intelligence go without expansion? The evidence suggests a surprising truth, that survival often relies less on brilliance than on adaptability. And in that adaptability, Australopithecus was quietly preparing the ground for us. The secret of upright posture lies in the skull. In apes, the spine enters from the back, forcing a forward-leaning stance. But in Australopithecus, the foramen magnum, the hole where the spinal cord enters, sat directly beneath the skull. This tiny shift balanced the head over the body, transforming posture. Suddenly, walking upright was not awkward. It was natural. The placement of this opening was more than anatomy. It was destiny. With heads poised above spines, these creatures saw further, carried more, and moved differently. A simple change in bone set the stage for all that followed in human evolution. Beneath the skull, the spine curved in a new way. Instead of a rigid column, Australopithecus carried an S-shaped backbone, a living spring designed to absorb the shock of every. Australopithecus carried within its body both the burden and the promise of humanity's future. From the pelvis downward, more clues emerge. Australopithecus had knees that angled inward, bringing the feet neatly under the body's center of gravity. This alignment made walking stable and efficient, step after step. Without it, each stride would have been clumsy, wasting precious energy. With it, long walks became possible. In a world of scattered resources, that difference meant survival. Efficiency was everything when predators waited at waterholes and food could vanish with the seasons. Those angled knees remind us, evolution is not about perfection. It is about solving the problem of survival in the simplest way possible. At the end of those legs, the feet of Australopithecus reveal yet another compromise. Their heels struck the ground heavily, arches absorbed shock, and toes aligned forward. Features we recognize instantly in our own steps, yet traces of their past lingered. The big toe, though forward, retained a hint of grasping ability, suggesting the forest was not entirely abandoned. These feet straddled two worlds, able to walk far but still ready to climb if danger approached. To see them is to glimpse transition itself, frozen in bone, a design still halfway between the branch and the savanna. Despite their upright walk, Australopithecus carried long arms and powerful shoulders, evidence that trees still played a vital role in survival. These limbs allowed them to climb quickly when predators threatened, or to gather fruit high above the ground. The body was not yet ready to fully abandon the trees. Instead, it held on to the safety of height while testing life on open ground. These dual abilities, climber and walker, were not weakness but resilience. In a dangerous landscape, having options was everything. Their shoulders and arms preserved the old world, even as their legs pulled them into the new. Hands are the most revealing of all. Australopithecus had sturdy thumbs and dexterous fingers, capable of gripping branches tightly. But these same hands hint at something more. Precision grip. Teeth show adaptation, not luxury. Food was hard-won, not chosen for taste. Their jaws remind us that survival often depends less on preference than on endurance, and endurance shaped who they were. Australopithecus came in many forms, and not all were equal in size. Some males were much larger than females, a pattern that may have shaped their social lives. Did bigger males dominate groups? Did smaller females rely on alliances for safety? Or did cooperation balance strength with strategy? The bones leave us hints, but not certainty. What they do reveal is variety, no single model, but a spectrum of shapes and sizes. This diversity was itself a survival strategy, spreading risks and roles. Within the differences of their bodies, we see the first questions about society taking shape. Piece by piece, the picture of Australopithecus comes into focus. Upright posture, efficient walking, long arms, strong jaws, small brains. Each feature tells part of the story. None of it was perfect. It was a patchwork of old and new, a mosaic of survival strategies. But together, these traits reveal the path evolution chose. Upright first, bigger brains later. Walking came before thinking, and endurance before brilliance. The body of Australopithecus was not a finished product. It was a work in progress. Yet in that progress lay the blueprint for everything we would become. Humanity's story had already begun. Walking upright, the game changer. Imagine the savanna as a wall of tall grass. On all fours, vision is limited, danger and opportunity hidden until too late. But stand up, and the horizon unfolds. Suddenly, the world is a map instead of a maze. Food, water, rivals, predators, each becomes visible earlier. This single shift, moving from 4 feet to 2, was not just a change in posture, it was a change in perspective. The savanna stopped being a trap and became a field of choices. That moment, standing upright, was the turning point that redefined what survival could mean. The African sun was merciless, punishing any creature exposed for too long. On all fours, a large portion of the body absorbed direct heat, but standing upright reduced that exposure dramatically. Only the head and shoulders now faced the burning sky, while breezes cooled the body more efficiently. Walking tall was not only about movement, it was about temperature control. This adaptation bought precious time during the hottest hours of the day, when predators sought shade. By walking upright, our ancestors solved the heat problem in a way no quadruped could, turning a lethal disadvantage into a survival advantage. Survival on the savanna often came down to distance. Resources were scattered, waterholes dried quickly, and carcasses drew competition from far away. On 4 legs, long journeys were costly, but bipedal walking consumed far less energy, step for step. This economy of motion allowed Australopithecus to travel farther without collapsing, to outlast rivals in reaching food or safety. Speed was not their strength, but endurance was. What they lacked in brute power, they compensated for in persistence. That endurance, born of walking, was the first step in humanity's long journey toward becoming the great long-distance travelers of the animal kingdom. With walking upright came another transformation. Hands were freed. No longer needed for knuckle walking, they were liberated for carrying. Food could be gathered and transported. Infants carried gift. We see the beginning of culture, the notion that survival was not only about one body, but about many living together. Standing tall gave another critical advantage: vision. With eyes elevated, threats could be spotted before they struck. A predator's movement in the grass, the dark shape of a storm, or the glimmer of a distant waterhole, all became visible seconds earlier. And in the wild, seconds mattered. A raised gaze also allowed for planning routes, for seeing beyond immediate obstacles. Those who stood upright were less likely to be caught off guard, less likely to become prey. Vision from height was not just a defensive strategy, it was foresight. And foresight would one day define the human way of life. Walking on 2 legs was not simple. The body needed a new rhythm to remain steady. Pelvis, knees, and arched feet worked together in a delicate dance. Each step stored energy, then released it, like a living spring. The result was efficient, smooth motion, a far cry from the awkward shuffle one might imagine. This design allowed distance without exhaustion, turning upright walking into a finely tuned engine of survival. The sway of the body, once a weakness, became a strength. With every balanced stride, Australopithecus was rehearsing for the future, perfecting the motion that would carry humanity across continents. But progress came with a cost. Upright posture strained the spine, inviting back pain. Feet bore the brunt of impact, leading to aches and wear. A narrower pelvis made childbirth more difficult, risking mother and child. Evolution had issued a bill, and it was steep. Yet the benefits outweighed the price. The ability to walk upright unlocked opportunities no other primate could match. Even today, our bodies remind us of that ancient trade. Aches and pains are the legacy of a gamble our ancestors made. It was a costly adaptation, but one that bought survival for the future. With hands free, something else began to unfold: communication. Gestures became signals, pointing to danger, offering food, beckoning other tools, technology, and civilization itself. Walking upright was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning, a first step that would lead humanity to reshape the world. Life and death on the savanna. The sun rises over the savanna, spilling gold across the grass. For a small band of Australopithecus, the day begins not with certainty, but with risk. Each step toward food or water could be the right decision, or the last. Predators are already awake, shadows moving just beyond sight. Hunger presses, thirst waits, and danger circles. This is not a gentle dawn, it is a wager with life. And as the first light peels across the plains, every choice carries weight. Survival on the edge of Africa was not guaranteed. It had to be earned again, every single morning. Before hunger even begins to gnaw, thirst rules. Water decides the rhythm of survival. A pool found too late means weakness. Too soon means predators lying in wait. Crocodiles lurk beneath the surface. Lions and hyenas ambush the edges. What would you risk for a drink? For Australopithecus, the gamble was daily. To walk toward water was to step into a trap they could not avoid. Yet to hesitate was to perish slowly under the heat. Thirst was not just discomfort. It was the first enemy they faced each day, and often the deadliest one. Food lay scattered in pockets of safety and danger. Roots had to be dug from hard ground, seeds gathered from brittle grass, and fallen fruit collected from beneath trees. Each step into open land exposed the forager to eyes that watched, waiting for a mistake. To find food was never just about hunger. It was about timing, awareness, and nerve. Stay too cautious, and you starved. Push too far, and you risked claws. Foraging was a calculation of life and death, and every meal was bought with risk, carried home through the shadows of the savanna. Sometimes the only warning was silence. Birds stopped calling, insects hushed, and the air itself seemed to hold its breath. To the untrained, it was nothing. To Australopithecus, it was the loudest alarm of all. Something hunted nearby. Do you freeze where you stand? Do you climb before claws appear? Meant predators. Lions and hyenas claimed first rights, while vultures marked the sky. To dart in for scraps was to risk sudden death. To wait too long was to find nothing left. The bones themselves became survival currency. With sharp stones or simple strikes, marrow could be pried free, a hidden feast inside. But even success came with danger. Every mouthful carried the memory of risk. The savanna offered food, but it never offered it freely. Every bite was contested. By midday, the sun itself became a hunter. Heat struck like an enemy stalking silently overhead. To move carelessly now was to invite collapse. The answer was not speed, but patience. Shade beneath scattered trees, slow pacing, and precise timing of movement. Knowing when to rest and when to walk was as vital as knowing where predators lay. For Australopithecus, the sun was not only light and warmth, it was danger disguised as daylight. Survival required reading the sky as carefully as the ground. The heat itself was a predator, and only the wise escaped its grip. Every decision turned on the smallest members. Infants clung tightly to their mothers, while juveniles followed, learning with every step. Adults circled around them, every path chosen with their safety in mind. For a predator, a child was the easiest target. For a group, protecting the young was the highest priority. To keep them alive meant to keep the future alive. Every glance, every gesture, every shared scrap of food bent around those tiny, vulnerable bodies. The savannah was unforgiving, but within the circle of the group, the young carried the hope of tomorrow's survival. On the savannah, seconds made the difference, and seconds could be saved through signals. A quick hand lifted, a throat clicking softly, eyes narrowing toward the horizon. Each movement carried meaning. No words were spoken, but messages were clear. A group could shift direction, freeze, or climb in unison, guided by these tiny gestures. Communication meant survival. It turned a collection of shadows, and hyenas laughed through the dark. For Australopithecus, safety lay in numbers. Nests in trees, tight circles on rocks, and shared warmth in the dark gave some measure of protection. Yet fear never lifted completely. The night was a realm of teeth and eyes, and survival depended on staying hidden until dawn. Darkness was not rest, it was trial, and only those who endured its dangers lived to see the fragile promise of another morning. At dawn, the cycle began again. A new route had to be chosen. Old risks weighed against new ones. The same questions returned. Where is water? Where is food? Where is safety? Each decision shaped not just survival for the day, but the legacy of the species. The path they took, the strategies they used, the instincts they honed, these would echo across generations. Life and death on the savannah were not random. They were a training ground, forging resilience in fragile bodies. And the question still lingers for us. In their place, would you have survived? Family, children, and community. In every group of Australopithecus, the youngest were the center. Infants clung tightly to their mothers, and the band moved as a circle around them. Every route chosen, every stop made, every risk weighed, was for the sake of those tiny bodies. One slip could end more than one life. A predator's strike on a child was not just tragedy, it was the unraveling of the future. Protecting the young became the invisible law that held groups together. To guard them was to guard tomorrow itself, and around them, the rhythm of the band's survival turned like a wheel. Compared to apes, Australopithecus children stayed dependent for longer. Their growth was not as extended as ours, but it stretched beyond what chimpanzees allowed. These extra years demanded patience, practice, and help. Childhood became a training ground, where skills of climbing, foraging, and vigilance were learned gradually. It meant more mouths to feed, more energy invested, but also more knowledge passed on. Each child carried not only hope but also risk, because longer childhoods meant longer vulnerability. Yet this compromise built the bridge toward humanity. In every slow-growing child, we see the roots of our own extended path to adulthood. Mothers could not carry the burden alone. Older siblings, aunts, and other females stepped in, holding, carrying, and guarding infants. This shared childcare, what scientists call allo-mothering, spread the risk and freed mothers to forage. It was cooperation woven into survival. A baby in borrowed arms was not unusual. It was necessary. This act of sharing was more than practical. It created bonds, trust, and a sense of responsibility beyond one's own offspring. Cooperation around children meant cooperation across the group. In the small gestures of shared arms, humanity's deeper instinct for community found some of its earliest roots. The role of males is less certain, but the possibilities are telling. If they stayed, they likely patrolled the edges, watched slower but reliable. It was less about explaining and more about demonstrating, and it was enough. Knowledge survived across generations, carried not in sentences, but in the silent choreography of survival, rehearsed every day on the savannah. Food was rarely abundant, and when it was, it became a test of community. A cracked nut offered to another, a marrow scrap left for a juvenile. a hidden root unearthed and divided. These gestures turned hunger into trust. They were small, quiet gifts, yet they held power. To share food was to forge loyalty. Unlike chimpanzees, who often take by force, Australopithecus seems to have leaned toward giving. This shift was profound. Survival became not just about individual cleverness, but about collective generosity. In those early acts of sharing, we glimpsed the dawn of a new kind of society. Juveniles played with energy and noise, chasing each other through the grass, mock climbing trees, tugging at branches. To outsiders, it was harmless fun. But beneath the laughter-like squeaks was training. Play sharpened reflexes, balance, and quick decision-making. Every tumble was practice for a real fall. Every chase a rehearsal for predator evasion. In the games of children lay the seeds of survival. Play taught coordination, judgment, and courage, skills that would later be called upon when danger came. What looked like joy was also strategy, nature's way of preparing fragile bodies for the brutal lessons of the savanna. Fingers moved through fur, plucking thorns, removing insects, smoothing hair. Grooming was more than hygiene. It was medicine for the mind. It calmed nerves after fear, sealed peace after conflict, and wove individuals into belonging. Touch was a language of its own, one that spoke of trust, comfort, and safety. We see it in chimpanzees today, and in Australopithecus it likely carried the same weight. Hands not only worked for food or climbing, they worked to hold the trails. These meetings mattered. They allowed new genes to flow between groups, keeping bloodlines healthy. They may also have allowed ideas, habits, gestures, preferences to spread. A chance meeting at a pool could ripple into generations of change. In those brief encounters, survival expanded beyond the single band. Community grew larger, stitched together at the edges of necessity and chance. At water, strangers became part of the story.
Diet, from fruits to bones. Once the forest offered abundance. Sweet fruits hung heavy, ripe, and easy to pluck, but as forests thinned and dry seasons lengthened, sweetness became scarce. For Australopithecus, the choice was simple yet brutal. Go farther, eat tougher, or go hungry. Some ventured beyond safe shade. Others stayed and endured lean times. Either way, the era of effortless meals was ending. The savanna demanded harder work, stronger teeth, and bolder stomachs. Evolution does not pause for nostalgia. When sweetness vanished, bodies had to adapt. This was the first step in a long story. Survival by changing what you ate. When fruits disappeared, fallback foods became lifelines. Roots pulled from dry soil, hard seeds cracked open, fibrous stems chewed until the jaw ached. These were not delicacies. They were calories of last resort. Tough, bitter, sometimes dangerous, yet they bought another day. Fallback foods tell us an important truth. Survival is not built on favorites, but on what you can endure. For Australopithecus, endurance meant learning to chew the unpalatable and stomach the harsh. They lived not by what they wanted, but by what they could scrape from the land when nothing else remained. And it was enough. The proof of this diet is etched into the very teeth of Australopithecus. Thick enamel, broad molars, and powerful jaws reveal a design built for grinding. Under microscopes, enamel shows scars, microscopic scratches and pits left by gritty, brittle foods. Each tooth is a record of struggle, a diary of what kept them alive. While apes cracked soft fruit, these ancestors chewed seeds, roots, and bark. Plan B was written into their very mouths. Their teeth were more than tools. They were survival machines, and in every scar we see a story of hunger, resilience, and adaptation carved in enamel. Beneath the savanna's surface hid another prize: tubers and bulbs. Bitter, fibrous, but calorie-rich, they became part of the daily rhythm. Noses sniffed for earthy scents. Hands, the first cautious steps toward meat on the menu of evolution. Even when predators stripped the flesh, bones remained, and bones held a hidden treasure: marrow. Locked inside hard shafts, marrow was rich in fat, dense in calories,
and vital for survival. With stones and persistence, Australopithecus may have learned to crack these natural vaults. Each break was a victory, food stored by nature, released by ingenuity. Marrow could fuel long walks, long nights, and hard seasons. It was a resource no predator could fully claim, for once the meat was gone, only sharp minds and stronger hands could unlock what was left behind. Marrow was survival's secret currency. When predators finally abandoned a carcass, seconds mattered. Quick hands darted in, pulling scraps of meat, scraping fat with sharp stones, licking grease from bones. Every fragment counted, but linger too long, and hyenas arrived, rewriting the rules with snapping jaws. This was survival as a race against time. To scavenge was to gamble. Steal what you could, then vanish before stronger jaws claimed it. These moments honed skills, courage, speed, and awareness. They taught Australopithecus that survival often lived in the margins, in scraps won at the edge of danger. And in those scraps, evolution's story advanced. Not every group ate the same. Some bands favored roots, others took more risks scavenging. Geography and season shaped diets as much as preference. Flexibility became their true weapon. Stomachs adjusted, habits shifted, and strategies varied. This adaptability meant survival in landscapes that changed year by year, season by season. The menu was never fixed. It was as fluid as the rains and the migrations of animals. Australopithecus thrived not because they specialized, but because they didn't. They bent with the land, and in that bending they survived. Evolution rewarded the flexible, not the stubborn, and their bones prove it. Food was not only eaten, it was shared. A mother might trade marrow scraps for watchful eyes over her child. Juveniles learned by tasting tools or just stones. Among the dust of ancient sites, one stone stands out. It is rounded, smoothed, and heavy, but far from any riverbed where such rocks belong. How did it arrive here? Was it carried, chosen, kept for a reason? Nature scatters stones, but nature does not select them. To find one out of place hints at intention, a decision made by hands that valued weight and shape. This was not yet the age of crafted tools, but perhaps it was the beginning of recognition, that objects could serve purposes beyond where they lay. A carried stone was a thought made real. Imagine a rock falling, splitting against another. Suddenly, one side bears a sharp edge. For an animal, this is meaningless. For Australopithecus, it may have been opportunity. A curious hand could have picked it up, testing what sharpness could do. Slice, scrape, pry. Was this accident or invention? The line is thin. Perhaps at first it was pure luck. But once noticed, luck can be repeated. Curiosity may have chased that edge again and again. From a single fractured stone, the idea of shaping the world might have begun. Not by design at first, but by attention turned to chance. On fossilized bones, faint scratches remain. Some scientists see the clear lines of butchery, evidence of meat sliced from bone by sharp edges. Others argue these marks could come from trampling hooves or shifting rocks. Which is true? The debate lingers, but the possibility is striking. If these cuts were deliberate, then Australopithecus did not merely carry stones, they used them. If not, then the scars are illusions of history. The truth may never be absolute, but even the suspicion that hands left marks on bones is enough to reshape how we view these early walkers. Not just survivors, but experimenters. Look closely at their hands. Strong thumbs, broad fingertips, and wrists built for power grips. These were not delicate tools of artistry, but sturdy instruments of survival. Such hands could carry infants, climb trees, and also core A bone alone was not a feast. But inside, marrow waited, a vault of fat and energy. To unlock it required more than teeth. It required impact. Stone meets bone with a ringing crack, fragments flying, marrow sliding free. Was this act chance or habit? To strike once could be accident. To strike often was intent. And intent repeated becomes tradition. Each crack echoed with more than hunger. It carried the possibility of skill. Breaking bones may have been the first deliberate use of stone, a step toward crafting. In the marrow's taste lay the first flavor of technology. How do you pass on skill without language? Through watching. A young one sees an elder lift a stone, strike bone, and pry marrow. No words guide the action, only the rhythm of gesture. Over time, imitation becomes memory, and memory becomes skill. Knowledge does not need speech to survive. It needs only eyes and persistence. In this way, the first lessons of technology were shared, not in classrooms or stories, but in the dust of the savanna, as children repeated what they saw. These were the first apprenticeships, silent, patient, and powerful enough to outlast generations. At some sites, clusters of heavy stones appear. Too many, too deliberate to be random scatter. Could these be the earliest caches? Stones carried, left, and returned to for use. If so, this was planning, foresight, the planting of security for tomorrow. A stone by the water meant a weapon ready, a tool prepared, a survival edge already waiting. To move stones not just for today but for the future was an extraordinary leap. It meant the mind was stretching beyond the present moment, edging closer to a distinctly human skill. To imagine tomorrow and prepare for it. When sharp flakes, battered cores, and clustered stones are found together, a pattern begins to emerge. Not random, not natural, but deliberate. Could this be the shadow of the first toolkit? If so, it was not yet the clear, crafted culture of later humans. Species of the clan Australopithecus. Imagine a single family branching into 4 directions. Each member faces the same challenges: predators, droughts, scarce food, but solves them in different ways. Australopithecus was not one species but many cousins, each experimenting with survival. Some leaned harder into walking, others clung longer to trees. Some chewed tougher diets, others softened their menu. Together they form a living laboratory of evolution. 4 approaches to the same test: how to endure Africa's shifting landscapes. Their paths did not all last, but each left traces, each gave clues. And in their shared experiments, we glimpse the roots of our own story. The earliest known of the clan, Australopithecus anamensis, walked the riverbanks of East Africa over 4 million years ago. Its jaws were primitive, built for grinding hard foods, yet its tibia, the shin bone, revealed a walker's life. This was no clumsy stepper. A. anamensis planted the first confident stride on the ground, even as it still relied on climbing trees. It was the anchor point, the foundation upon which the rest would build. To see its bones is to see the dawn of upright life, a creature straddling 2 worlds, and the beginning of a journey that would lead to us. Then came Australopithecus afarensis, the most famous of them all. From Lucy's delicate bones to the Laetoli footprints hardened in ash, afarensis showed a stride that feels uncannily like ours. Knees angled inward, hips widened for balance, and arches supported long walks across open plains. Afarensis was the true strider of the Rift Valley, a walker built for distance. Yet its long arms and curved fingers revealed that the trees were not yet forgotten. It balanced ground and branch, but leaned further toward us. Afarensis was evolution's bold bet, that upright walking was not a side experiment, but the main road. Far to the south, Australopithecus africanus left its bones in South African caves, balances of ground and tree, of strength and subtlety. In Sediba we glimpse a threshold, the last shadows of Australopithecus, and the dawn of something new. Across all 4 species, teeth tell the tale of survival. Anamensis bore thick enamel for cracking hard seeds. Afarensis ground a varied menu of fruits and fibrous plants. Africanus leaned toward softer, diverse foods. Sediba shows traces of flexibility, perhaps even more selective eating. Each species carried jaws and molars tuned to its environment, a survival bet written in enamel. These differences were not trivial. They determined who endured droughts, who starved in famine, and who thrived when the land shifted. The menu was not just a diet, it was destiny, and each cousin wagered on a slightly different recipe for survival. Though all were walkers, None had fully abandoned the trees. Anamensis and afarensis carried long arms, climbers' shoulders and curved fingers, safety nets against predators. Africanus showed signs of relying less on branches, while Sediba retained shoulders angled for climbing even as its hands reached for more precise control. Their feet, however, told another story. Strong heels, emerging arches, toes aligned forward. Each species balanced differently, but the general trend was clear. The ground was winning. The tug between tree and savanna was visible in their very bones, a struggle that shaped their posture, their habits, and their future. Walking upright was not the same for all. Anamensis managed with sturdy legs but paid higher energy costs. Afarensis refined the stride, with hips and knees angled for smooth distance walking. Africanus held a middle ground, capable on land but still hedging with tree climbing. Sediba revealed a pelvis with echoes of Homo, efficient but imperfect. Each species solved the math of motion differently, weighing energy, safety, and endurance. Afarensis shone as the master walker, but the others played with compromise. In their hips and knees, we see evolution running calculations, balancing effort edge of two worlds. Each species was written by its environment, by rainfall, predators, plants, and terrain. Their distribution across the continent shows that evolution was not confined to one cradle, but unfolded in multiple places. Different landscapes carved different solutions. The map of Australopithecus is not a single path, but a branching web of experiments across Africa, each shaped by the land beneath their feet. Each cousin left something for us. Anamensis anchored the earliest roots of bipedalism. Afarensis refined the stride into an efficient walker. Africanus softened features, offering hints of longer childhoods and broader diets. Sediba flirted with modernity, its hands and pelvis sketching blueprints for Homo. None were us, but each contributed a piece. They were not failures, but stepping stones, each adding survival tricks, anatomical refinements, and social hints that future species would inherit. Their gifts are scattered through time, written in fossil and bone. Together, they formed the scaffolding from which humanity's next chapter could rise. 4 cousins, 4 paths, 1 direction. Anamensis, Afarensis, Africanus, Sediba, all experiments in survival. Some ended in extinction, others in transition. Yet their stories braid into a single thread that points forward, toward Homo. They were not perfect humans, nor simple apes, but something in between. And in their bones we see evolution's patience. Slow, steady steps across millions of years. The clan of Australopithecus was never meant to last forever. Its purpose was to carry the torch far enough that others could take it further. And on the horizon, the next name waits. Homo, the handy one. Rivals and predators. The savanna was never empty. Every step crossed someone else's claim. Lions guarding shade, hyenas prowling trails, crocodiles ruling water. For Australopithecus, the world was a territory of teeth. Food was never free, water was never safe. To survive here was to balance hunger against risk, thirst against fear. The land itself was contested ground, carved up by predators and rivals stronger than they were. And yet, they endured. How? By calculation, by timing, by learning the invisible rules of a dangerous neighborhood. In this brutal landscape, intelligence mattered as much as strength, and every choice was a gamble. Morning light was no comfort. Low sun turned the grass into gold, but behind that gold crouched death. The saber-toothed cat, its canines as long as daggers, moved silently, waiting for a mistake. Australopithecus woke to fruit and roots, but always under the gaze of hidden hunters. Do you climb now, clinging to branches for safety? Do you freeze, blending into stillness? Or do you risk one more mouthful before the cat strikes? Dawn was not a gentle beginning. It was the hour of judgment. Each morning, survival was decided in the hush between first light and the saber-tooth's silent lunge. The river shimmered brown and calm, but beneath it waited jaws, Crocodiles lurked in silence, their eyes just above the surface, patient as stone. Thirst forced Australopithecus to the edge, but here, one mistake meant death. Step too far, and the water itself attacked. Crocodiles turned need into ambush, the river into a trap. Yet water was life, and they could not avoid it. The gamble was constant. Drink quickly, scan constantly, retreat immediately. In this world, even thirst was a predator, and the lesson was clear. Survival was never just about endurance. It was about reading danger before it moved. As the sun dropped, new threats emerged. Hyenas and jackals prowled the twilight, following bands that could be avoided, but they could be outmaneuvered. On the savanna, victory was rarely about winning outright. More often, it was about not losing what you already held. A fallen antelope was both a blessing and a curse. Its body promised rich meat, marrow and fat, but it also drew every competitor for miles. Lions, hyenas, vultures, even rival primates arrived in minutes. The economy of the carcass was simple. The first cut fed you, the second invited danger. Timing became the only weapon Australopithecus possessed. Move too soon, and you faced lions. Move too late, and nothing remained. To win was to seize scraps in the thin window between predator and scavenger. Every carcass was a market of life, where hesitation cost everything and speed meant survival. When danger struck, the band had options, but none were certain. A sharp click of the throat, a cough-like call, or a frozen stare sent ripples through the group. Sometimes bluffing worked, standing tall, raising arms, shouting into the wind. Sometimes, only silence and stillness saved them. The savanna was a chessboard where each move mattered. Who acted first often decided who lived. An early alarm might save the band. A mistimed flight might spark a chase. In these moments, behavior itself became a weapon. Strategy was survival, and instinct sharpened into tactics, one dangerous encounter at a time. Survival left its marks. A torn heel from a crocodile strike, a missing finger from a bad climb, scratches across the face from a predator's swipe. Each scar was a story, a warning etched into flesh. The young learned by watching, memorizing near misses before they made their own. Scars became lessons, silent teachers written on the skin of survivors. They reminded the group that mistakes were costly, but also that endurance was possible. Every sunrise brought new risks, but every scar carried the memory of how to face them. Pain became knowledge, and knowledge became tomorrow's thin chance at survival. The shadow of extinction. The world of Australopithecus was never steady. Rain patterns swung from feast to famine. Lakes that once shimmered wide shrank into muddy pools. Woodlands thinned, leaving grass where shade had stood. A body built for two worlds, tree and ground, faced a world that refused to sit still. Every shift in climate rewrote the map of survival. Routes closed, old refuges vanished, and choices grew sharper. Could a creature designed for balance keep pace with a landscape that never stopped moving? The challenge was no longer just predators or rivals. It was the very earth beneath their feet changing its rules. Forests once offered cover, fruit, and safety, but as they fragmented into scattered patches, the gaps between them became gauntlets of danger. To move meant exposure, to claws, to thirst, to the burning sun. Australopithecus could still climb, but each climb meant fewer trees to reach. The careful walker had to thread narrow paths between peril and necessity. Every journey became a wager, every crossing a test of endurance. Safe places shrank while danger multiplied. How long could they balance survival on ground that offered fewer shelters and more risks? The squeeze was real, and it pressed harder each season. Into this pressure came newcomers. Early Homo appeared at the same waterholes, the same carcass sites, the same fragile patches of safety. They carried slightly larger brains, sharper planning, and perhaps greater cooperation. The board was the same, but the moves had changed. Suddenly, Australopithecus was no longer the only hominin navigating the savanna. A cousin species had arrived, one that thought differently, planned further, and risked more. To share space was to share survival, but not equally. And in this contest, brains began to weigh as much as teeth or speed. The age of competition among cousins had begun. Marrow, once a secret prize, became a race. A bone left by lions was now contested not only by hyenas but by other hominins. Arrive too late, and you starved. Arrive too early, and you bled for it. Timing became destiny. Numbers. Hunger, not teeth or claws, became the most relentless predator of all. Patient, quiet, and unending. As bands of Australopithecus weakened, predators adapted. Lions, leopards, hyenas, even crocodiles learned the rhythms of their stress. Old escape routes failed when drought left trees sparse and rivers low. To predators, vulnerability was opportunity. Once, caution and vigilance saved them. But what happens when the land itself refuses to cooperate? When there are fewer places to hide, fewer paths to run. Predators evolved habits keyed to their weakness. The savanna became sharper, deadlier, tuned against them. And as natural enemies grew more efficient, even caution, once their greatest defense, was no longer enough to guarantee survival. By the end, survival clung to fragments. Rocky hills, spring-fed gullies, and hidden pockets of woodland became islands of safety and seas of grass. These refuges kept small bands alive today, but isolation carried a cost. With fewer mates, fewer exchanges between groups, the genetic lifeline narrowed. Survival in the moment came at the expense of the future. The world outside these islands moved on, reshaping without them. To be cut off was to be spared, but also to be left behind. Survival shrank into small corners of Africa, and with it, the once wide-ranging story of Australopithecus. In the fossil record, Australopithecus seems to vanish unevenly. In some places, their bones blink out quickly. In others, they fade slowly, mixed with the remains of their cousins. To us, the absence looks sudden, but the reality was a long, uneven decline. Fewer bodies, fewer traces, until silence remained. Did they truly vanish? Or were their traits woven into those who came next, absorbed rather than erased? Extinction in prehistory was rarely a clean break. It was a fading, a blending. The bones disappear, but the story continues, carried forward in the lives of the inheritance. The last footsteps of Australopithecus did not vanish into nothing. They opened a door, and as we step through it today, the question remains, what will we do with what they gave us? Their shadow is ours, and it still walks beside us. From Australopithecus to us. The first inheritance was movement itself. By walking upright, Australopithecus changed the odds of survival. This gait cooled the body under the sun, conserving energy where quadrupeds overheated. It stretched horizons, distant water, scattered fruit, hidden roots, making them reachable in ways crawling bodies could not match. It steadied balance, giving each step efficiency rather than waste. From this stride, a new kind of traveler emerged, one who could cross savannas and outlast drought. Today, when we walk for hours without collapse, we echo their gift. Upright posture was not only anatomy, it was the foundation of every human journey. We did not inherit the cheetah's burst of speed, nor the lion's sudden strike. What Australopithecus passed down was something subtler: stamina. They survived not by outrunning danger, but by outlasting it. Step after steady step, their bodies carried them across miles when predators tired and quit. That endurance became humanity's quiet strength. It is why marathons today echo ancient patterns, why persistence outshines power. Endurance hunts, patient migrations, the ability to keep going when others stop, all trace back to these ancestors. Stamina, not speed, was the weapon. A weapon of patience that wrote survival into our blood. With upright walking came a revolution in the hands. Freed from the ground, they carried food, infants, and stones. A hand that carries is a hand that plans. To hold something for later is to imagine a future. That simple act, bringing a root home, cradling a child, storing a stone, planted the seed of foresight. The palm became a container not just for objects, but for ideas. When Australopithecus learned to plan with their hands, they began shaping tomorrow. From those gestures came the first hints of culture, invention, and ultimately, the tools and cities we know today. Food carried could be food shared. A marrow scrap offered to another was more across years of guidance. That road began with Australopithecus, whose children needed time to learn the dangerous world. And from that need, culture and knowledge could take root. Survival meant eating what the land offered. Fruits when they were plenty, roots when the soil was dry, marrow when predators left scraps. Australopithecus did not lock itself to one food. This flexibility became an inheritance as powerful as upright walking. It meant adapting to season and place, turning scarcity into opportunity. Today, that same trait explains humanity's global reach. From Arctic ice to tropical jungle, our diet bends with circumstance. It is not delicacy that made us thrive, but adaptability. The ability to eat differently in different lands was first rehearsed by them and perfected by us. At first, there were gestures, a pointed finger at danger, a hand offering food, a posture that meant wait. These signals carried meaning without words. Over time, they grew into richer systems, gestures that became plans, warnings that became stories. Once memories could be shared, lessons outlived the bodies that learned them. A scar no longer needed to teach one child alone. It could be explained, preserved, repeated. That shift, signal into story, was the dawn of language, and it began in the simple, silent signals of Australopithecus, where hands and eyes carried messages long before mouths learned to speak. Though their bones are gone, their code is still inside us. Vigilance against danger, cooperation in groups, curiosity about tools, endurance through hardship. These are their gifts, alive in us today. Every long walk, every act of trust, every spark of invention echoes their survival strategies. They solved a world of predators and famine, and we carry those solutions forward. We call them instincts, but they are deeper. They are inheritance. The shadow of Australopithecus walks within us still, and with each step we take, we repeat the choices they made. To endure, to adapt. Closing reflection. The echo of ancient footsteps. Every step we take today, across sidewalks, up staircases, down crowded streets, carries an echo. Beneath the shuffle of shoes lies the memory of bare feet pressing African ground 4 million years ago. When we walk, we repeat the first choice they made. To rise, to balance, to keep moving forward. The world has changed around us, but the motion remains the same. Our footsteps are modern, yet ancient. Each stride is a whisper from the past, reminding us that the path from Australopithecus to us is not broken. It is continuous, a rhythm unbroken across the ages. We imagine ourselves modern, disconnected from primal life. Yet inside us live instincts as old as Australopithecus. Vigilance, the quick glance at a shadow. Curiosity, the urge to reach for something new. The pull to belong, the comfort of company in uncertain times. These drives remain, even beneath today's noise. They guide choices we barely notice, pushing us toward safety, toward learning, toward one another. They are not relics, but living codes in our blood. The quiet instincts of a small-bodied ancestor still shape how we cross streets, form friendships, and face risk. In silence, they are still speaking. Once, survival meant gathering at fires, sharing warmth and stories in the dark. Today, we gather around glowing screens, trading news and laughter across wires instead of flames. The circle is larger, but the logic is the same. Share knowledge, bond through story, find safety in connection. Technology may seem new, but it runs on ancient wiring. We still huddle, we still gossip, we still warn and wonder together. From the campfire to the city light, the pattern holds. Are we truly so different? Or are we just carrying old habits into brighter, louder rooms? From Australopithecus, we inherited more than posture. We inherited stamina. You listen closely, you will hear it.